up next, we have something I'm really excited about. So Anita got to share with you. I kind of prefaced this earlier when I met them. It was interesting because I got a chance to kind of watch the progress of a lot of the things that they were able to do. So I knew that their story was real, and I also knew that the amount of work that her and her team were putting into it. And I wanted her to be able to share that with you all. But there's a type of work that I think is a lot different in this space, specifically talking about SEO. And I think when you think about SEO for B2B or e-commerce, it's different than what it's like for publishers. But even within that, I think there's this separate section, and that is the large brand publisher. SEO, I think there's very few people that are probably experts in that space that have worked on that type of site, and we have three of them with us here today. So please join me in welcoming Carolyn, Lariza, and Richard from ESPN, Complex, and the Wall Street Journal to the stage.
Good stuff. Yeah. Okay.
Got some on the chair for you. Okay. All right. Well, welcome. Yeah. So I guess I'll start off, and maybe Richard, we can start with you, but maybe just give everybody just kind of a quick background about who you guys are and where you came from.
Okay, so first of all, I came from across the pond in London, a place just outside London called Reading, a town called Caversham, for those of you that know the area. I moved to sunny New Jersey about 6 years ago, and had a great privilege joining the Wall Street Journal about 2 years ago. And since then, I've taken over the role of leading up the SEO, technical SEO team, and helping drive strategy for SEO across the organization.
Lariza?
Hello, everyone. Happy Women's History Month to all the women here today. Yay to my women. My name is Lariza Quintero. I am the SEO manager at Complex Networks. So I oversee our main Complex site, as well as First We Feast, Soul Collector, and anything that falls under the Complex umbrella. A little about myself really quick. My background is cybersecurity, so that's what I did. I wanted to be a cop. It was in the roadmaps. But I fell in love with digital marketing and eventually fell into the realm of SEO. I was on the agency side, so got to experience e-commerce and also publication clients, and small scale and also large scales. And now I'm in-house working for Complex, a brand that I truly love and passionate about.
And Carolyn?
I'm Carolyn Shelby. I head up SEO at ESPN. I've only been there since October. I've been in the industry itself since '94. So in late 1994, I helped co-found an internet service provider. So I don't know. Those are old school things. We were competing with AOL and CompuServe at the time. CompuServe actually had an office below us, and it was all their modem racks made our floor hot. It was. I got some stories about that. But I built my first website in January of 1995, and I just kind of fell into SEO because there were these things that ranked websites, and I'm a very competitive person. And if I wasn't at the top of the list, I got very upset. So I figured out how to make sure I was always at the top.
And now you've infiltrated the building.
Yeah.
Well, I guess to kind of get things kicked off, I thought it might be fun just to start with the worst SEO advice you've ever seen someone receive. And I'm guessing all of you have probably seen some pretty bad advice before. Richard, maybe we'll start with you.
I mean, I'm just going to go for the classic. I'm going to ensure your page will rank on page. Your page is going to rank on page one.
Emails about that all the time.
It still happens, and people are still promoting that actively. So, stuff as many keywords as you can into your content.
In white text, right?
In white text, and sometimes in JavaScript, and hide it.
Carolyn, what about you?
Some of the things I've seen lately, that people are still buying links. They're still submitting their sites to directories, meaningless directories all over the place. And they've gotten advice that they should no index pages on their site. I think this ties into that pruning that everyone's into now. Like, oh yeah, all these pages, just no index them and everything will be fine. And it's like, no, that's actually kind of bad, and it was horrible.
I think the worst No, probably is not the worst, but one that really just stays and has shaped my career is optimize your site just for Google. I don't think, yes, Google is Google, and for most of us, that's where the majority of our organic traffic does come. But I've seen in other cases where clients thought the majority of their traffic was from Google, and it wasn't. It was from Bing. It's because their demographic was used to Bing. So I think being really aware of where your audience is coming from, what devices, what search engines, aggregators, I think is really important when you do think of how you're creating content and how people are consuming content.
So to get us warmed up just a little bit, I figured I'd just grab your take on a number of different topics, and we'll kind of touch on these sort of rapid fire as we hop through here. But the first one is, here's a tweet. Sites with crappy links, crappy content, site speed, crawlability, EAT. They're all various parts of a larger thing, tons of exceptions to every rule. Is this true? Is it not true?
So I think I saw a tweet yesterday from the Google sphere. It might have been John Mueller, I'm not sure. But I stand by it. If a site, and we've seen this in articles as well, where maybe the page template isn't optimized the best, was still working on it, work in progress, but the content's awesome. And I think good content will always render and will always appear and surface.
I think there are going to be exceptions to every rule, and I don't think any site with universally crappy links is going to be able to rank. Any site with universally crappy content. A site is more than... And when they say it can rank, does that mean just the homepage? I mean, there's a lot of things that go into that. If you are truly the most relevant answer for a given query, you're going to show up number one. But is it the query that you want to show up for? And is that where you want to be? So, yeah, that's accurate.
Classic, it depends.
It always depends. That's what SEOs say.
Yeah, I definitely agree. I ran into searches just on my own where I land on a page and the content wasn't really reflecting what I was searching. And in my mind, as an SEO professional, my thought was like, how did this get here? Salute to it getting on page one, but it wasn't really reflecting what I was searching for. But I do think they're doing something well that is contributing to the whole pie. So I definitely agree.
What about this one? So this is a kind of a heated debate inside of the world of SEO, this idea of a subdomain versus a subfolder. I was interested to see if any of you had a strong take on this one in particular.
I do. I don't understand why this is even a debate. A subdomain is treated like a separate website, and a subfolder is part of the same website. So period, end of story. The only time your client gets to insist that it goes on a subdomain is when there's a technical reason why they cannot make it a subfolder.
I definitely agree. Keeping everything in the same ecosystem, unless it's your shop. I have seen it in cases where your shop does live outside of your main domain. I think everything should be kept in the same ecosystem.
I completely agree with you, but we do have a situation where we have conferencing sites and other marketing sites that aren't anything to do with the actual publication itself. And so we have those as domain dot.
Yeah, if it needs to be differentiated,
that's the only,
it's not the same content.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so we do a lot of that. And the sub...
That's okay.
That's okay.
Didn't break.
The phone is not broken. I don't think. The subfolder strategy, of course, is for a section. We do that also, and that's more for like when it's WSJ.com content that we need to surface in terms of, for instance, I can give you an example, /pro, so some of our pro services, that's a separate subdomain. So there's instances where both are applicable.
It depends once again.
It depends.
So one of the things that I thought was really interesting is that despite the kind of changing landscape of SEO jobs continue to grow, and it seems like there's becoming a higher and higher demand for these types of professionals. I think we could probably all agree that there's a varying gradient of the quality of these different professionals. What do you think? Is this job going to continue to grow? And furthermore, why do you think that we continue to see like this higher and higher demand for SEO?
I definitely think it's going to continue to grow. There's so many articles out there that say SEO is dead, all these type of articles out there, I don't think it's going anywhere, especially for pioneers who have been around. They've probably seen the changes throughout the year so rapidly. So I think as technology continues to evolve, SEO, the importance of SEO should be really emphasized in companies. I've been on the agency side again, where the SEO team was really small compared to paid search. At Complex as well, the SEO team is small. So I think hopefully, I would like to see SEO teams be bigger in companies and agency, but I don't think it's going anywhere, SEO jobs.
I found that SEO jobs explicitly labeled that are actually going down, not growing, and they're renaming them as like audience growth and audience engagement. But the types of jobs that require SEO knowledge and a grasp of the concepts are growing, and it's all the positions at the company. We expect our writers to have some SEO awareness. We expect the devs to have some SEO awareness. We expect the marketing people to understand what SEO can do, what it can't do, and how to manipulate the message to make sure that it matches things. So I don't know that you're straight up, SEO strategist type of jobs are going to grow indefinitely. I imagine they're going to plateau and maybe taper off a little. But I think knowing SEO and having the ability to affect some change in that is going to be something that every job, or at least a lot of jobs, are going to have to start absorbing and making a part of the core requirements.
So, I didn't get my say on it. I have a big plug here. Actually, firstly, I mean, there should be an SEO team with strategists, technical SEOs, content packaging, all that stuff. So everything that goes into a newsroom, at least. But there's also SEO as a culture, and that needs to be sort of like part of the DNA of the whole company. And that's something we're doing really well right now. We're really getting buy-in from all management, all sides of the company. Yes, this is what I believe happened. I saw it. The whole in the last X amount of years, there was a big push towards social. So everyone kind of moved onto the social bandwagon, paid ads. And I think people just moved away from SEO, and now that's coming back. People are now realizing it's important again, and it always was important. And yes, SEO jobs are growing. They definitely are for us. And if anyone wants to come and talk to me after this, I'm more than happy to talk to you about it, because we definitely have openings. And I think most publishers do. It's definitely something that's out there, and it's currently growing. In the future, I think it will stabilize, but it's currently growing.
So recently, this is another one of those kind of heated debates. So you have Google on one side saying, stick to the basics, don't pay attention to these things. And then you have other folks in the field. They seem to have a particularly contentious relationship with Rand. But he says dwell time, CTR, new theory is those are generally made up. Search is much more simple than people think. Do you buy into that? Do you buy into this idea that the algorithm, that the way that Google thinks about search in general is simple?
Are you looking at me? Okay, so first of all, I think Rand got a bit of a rough deal here. He got a little bit of a slamming there, but also, Gary is also an authority on the Google sphere.
I don't think he's here today.
He's not here today, so I can say more things. Yes, I think the basics are key. I mean, we definitely, when I started at the Wall Street Journal, I went, literally looked at, the bricks and mortar and the foundations. What's going on? We're still doing it now. We're still auditing weekly, finding issues, and some of them aren't easy to fix. So it takes time to put those in place. But all the basics have to be covered. You have to cover your bases and make sure that you have, page speed, broken links, everything that's to do with technical SEO is relevant. And then the other stuff should be looked at as metrics also. But definitely, build the house upwards.
Carolyn, what about CTR dwell time? Are these things that you think about, or do you think it's something different than this?
There are certain types of queries where dwell time and the amount of time that you're on the page, engagement, is going to make a difference, but there's other types of queries where it's not going to make a difference. So to say that universally you would need to worry about that, I think is incorrect. I think there are certain industries and certain types of queries where, yeah, you do want to keep the user on the page. And if you're making money with ads anyway, you're already concerned about how long the user's spending on the page because you want to know how many ads you can push at them. So I don't think it's going to be a big deal for everyone. I think it's always been a big deal for certain types of queries, and I wouldn't hyperventilate over it.
Lariza, is it as simple as Google says it is?
That whole Reddit thread was really intense, even just going through it myself that day. I do think it is simple, but it's easier said than done. There is the crawlability. I think that's super important. Creating content that people are searching for, that's super important. And then you have other metrics that are on other platforms, SEO tools, that you also sort of rely on. But I think the basics are easy. Once again, it's easier said than done, but I do think we have to stick to the basics in terms of crawlability, at least.
You know, one of the slides that I used to do in my basics training was I'd show there was a long time ago, some guy said that SEO isn't rocket science, it's like baking a cake. Mm-hmm. And I showed a slide of a cake, and I said, you know, SEO is really the sugar. And if you skip adding the sugar to the cake, you're still going to have a cake at the end of the process, but it's going to taste like crap. So you do need to stick to the basics because I think people have a tendency to forget the underlying cake and focus on the frosting. You know, and you don't want frosting on styrofoam. That's nasty. Yeah,
So I guess one of the other things that we get is this kind of question about, and of all the places to talk about it, right? Do you trust the advice that Google gives on these things? So, I mean, obviously they're trying to be as transparent as they can be, but they have multiple engineers and members of their webmaster team, many of which have spoken here before, that provide advice. How much stock do you put into the advice that members of Google's team delivers to SEOs?
You know, I find Google's always spoken. Anything they say has to be parsed in like a Clintonian kind of way. It's, you know, what is the definition of it depends on what is, right? So they're very, very specific when they say certain things, and we don't always necessarily know what the technical definition of what they're saying is. So we start making guesses and extrapolations. You really, you know, you have to parse literally every word that comes out of their mouth and make sure that you understand specifically what it is they're talking about, and that it's likely not going to be a broad recommendation. It's something that it specifically addresses the question that was asked, and it really probably only applies to that question. So do I trust what they say? When I completely understand what question it is they're answering, yes. But they're not out to help us game the system. So
I have to say yes. You have to trust them to an extent. I know we are in the Google house, so... But
I forgot.
Right? I forgot.
This whole room is wired with explosives, so choose your words carefully.
I'm so dead.
But yeah, a lot of things are contradicting at times. So one day they could say one thing, and then the next day it's like, oh wait, I thought this was important. So I think it is important, but I'm also one to follow a lot of other industry leaders in the space for SEO advice. So I would say, yeah, you still need to trust Google to some point.
Richard, do you trust Google?
Okay, so it's an interesting question. I mean, you should take on board what they announce and what they publish when they publish it and if they publish it. It was really nice that they published a core update yesterday.
They confirmed it?
They confirmed it on Twitter yesterday as opposed to the previous 5 this year, which went...
And they offered a lot of helpful advice, too, on the update, huh?
Yeah, non-specific. So I think the key is take the... I'm on Twitter every day watching see what's going on, following different people and checking their accounts also. We have definitely listened to stuff and taken stuff on board internally. but there's a lot of flux. So it may be, you may be told one thing today, and it turns out a few months later something else is actually happening. So that's something I've picked up on. Kind of, you have to watch it and see whether that's actually going to come to fruition or going to happen, or is it going to morph into something else?
So this is a question that I think is probably one of the ones that, honestly, for me, that I was most interested to get each of your takes on, and that is, how is SEO different for large brands or sites? So I would venture to guess that most of the folks in this room that haven't worked on a large brand or site in an SEO capacity before would probably assume that it's quite a bit different than working on a smaller site or medium-sized site, or even like an e-commerce or B2B site or something like that. Richard, we'll start with you.
Yeah, so I've worked on small sites, tiny sites, medium-sized sites, and now
Sites the size of your head.
Sites bigger than my head. And the current site I work on is enormous, with several different sections to it, several different parts. I actually still, because we have these conferencing sites that are WordPress-based, I still get my hands dirty with about 30-odd plus sites that are WordPress sites. We use Yoast. I've always been a big fan of Yoast. We implement that. So we use a lot of the same tools, SEMrush. We use Screaming Frog. We use a lot of the stuff, other people will use. But we also need to use bigger tools because we have so much content to audit. So also one thing I'd say is there's a very small change for us because of the indexability and how much we get indexed and the frequency. We can make some very small changes, and that has quite a big impact very quickly. Whereas a smaller site, that might take a little longer.
Yeah, I mean, the basics and fundamentals of SEO are the same regardless of whether you're on a small site or a large site. Is your page crawlable? Is the content good? Is the underlying structure good? How are your internal links? How's your navigation? All of those things are the same, but we're just doing it at a much larger scale. So the nice thing is when you're on like a centralized platform, if there's a structural change that you make, you can deploy it out across millions of pages at once, just with a click of a button. It's not I'm working on this page, then I'm working on that page. But otherwise, SEO is still SEO. We do have the luxury of not really having to worry about building backlinks. We have the luxury of not really having to worry about
I think there's a slide coming up on that.
I think there is, yeah. I think we don't have to necessarily worry about doing something to get completely kicked out of the index, because that's like, that would be kind of.
We'd have to do something pretty bad, I think.
We'd have to do something like murder somebody. That would be like really awful, right? Yeah. So. Well, it's unlikely. That's my job.
Now we're all complicit, so it's just a joke, everyone.
Yeah.
Yeah, definitely the number of pages. I think when you're auditing or even doing content strategies, for a website that is 50 pages max, your keyword research and your keyword list that you want to rank is much smaller versus a site like Complex that has so many verticals, so many topics, so many subtopics. So I think anyone who hasn't have experience with a large site could see that's overwhelming, but anyone coming into position like an SEO manager that has experience handling big sites, I think how to sort of organize just a large site like that. And another big difference, I think, implementing strategy. When you think of strategy at a larger scale, I think you have to think about the domino effect that your strategy is going to have. Just because it's good for SEO doesn't mean it's good for the ad ops team or good for the art team. Like, you really have to think about the domino effect. And compared to smaller sites, you could pass your strategy to one or two people and then it's signed off. But at larger companies, I think you really have to really be persistent with your strategy and go through several teams.
I'd just like to add one more thing. There's also one thing you have to take on board is that there's a lot more technology involved, a lot different technology. We're using Node.js. You're having to take on board new languages, infrastructures that you may not have worked with before. You have to know AWS and how that works. You have to know how Google Cloud works. You need to know I've certainly, from my point of view, I come from a technical SEO background, so that's definitely a big change. That's something you could opt, but it's doable.
So we kind of Carolyn set this one up perfectly.
Yeah,
so,
we can skip this one.
So do you guys care about backlinks? I mean, we can keep this one short, but does it something you pay attention to or no?
In general, I don't freak out about the acquisition of new backlinks, but what I do look at is, are there backlinks that are not being utilized or owned correctly? If you take an old site that we had, and then we've got the new site, and we left 26 million backlinks at the old site because they did a 302 redirect instead of a 301. That's 26 million backlinks that I would like to have. Thank you very much.
Carolyn, you have 242 million. Leave some for the rest of us.
No, that's not my job.
In regards, backlinks is really important. I'm currently in the process of doing a small sort of strategy behind backlinks, but it's also very time consuming. Unfortunately, in a perfect utopia world, it would be one person or a team dedicated to backlinks. I know there's agencies that you could hire that will help you with backlinks. People pay for backlinks, which I don't suggest. But if you're doing that, that's up to you. But I think my main focus is creating content, suggestion content, working with the editorial team that will organically get these backlinks. Even our sports content, we're complex, we're known for music, pop culture, but even our sports content, we find a lot of times that we have really great publications linking to our articles, and these are sports articles. So I think creating content that will organically get those backlinks is my main focus.
So I think we identify certain backlinks that we know produce a lot of traffic, and we don't focus on backlinks like you would on a medium or smaller sized site. What I do, part of my audit process is I do look for toxic backlinks. I do like finding those because I found some interesting things there, where there's been some toxic sites linking to us doing naughty things.
What would you consider a toxic backlink?
Sites that aren't necessarily okay. I'm gonna try for it. There have been a couple of situations where people are trying to replicate our site, and that's a big legal issue. We have a legal team that deals with that.
So I'm going to skip ahead here just a little bit because I want to get through a chance for you to use those lovely paddles there that the marketing team came up with. Otherwise, it's all for naught. But I want to ask this question because I think it's particularly interesting, and I don't want to. I realize what building we're in here, but I think everybody here notices that when they pull out their mobile phone or even searching on a desktop now, that search results look a lot different than they did 5 or 6 years ago. And so how do you approach things like the way that Google is using rich data inside of SERP? So, obviously there's different types of markup you can add to the site, but how interested are you in helping in this process?
My advice since we were right there, my advice to the company or to the executives was, oh God, I'm going to get in trouble for saying this. Basically, if Google wants the content, they're going to take it. So we should at least cooperate and make it easy for them to get what they want and then reference us.
I, for one, welcome our robot overlords.
Right, because fighting against the robot overlords is going to not result in happiness. So yeah, that was... But we're very interested in it. We do keep an eye on it, and we spend a lot of time making sure that we are popping up in those special features, because if we're not, even if we're the number one result, if we're not in that special feature, there's that perception that there's less relevancy. So maintaining that relevancy is really high on my priority list.
I was really anti the 0 results, I think. It was like the time that came up. And it was just like one thing there. So I'm super anti those. I hope those don't keep evolving. But in terms of all the other rich data, unfortunately can't be finding this. I think it's important to make sure your markup is correctly. Just because it validated correctly last year doesn't mean it validates correctly this year. So staying on top of that. And one of the biggest standouts to me, probably the answer boxes and the feature snippets and the people also ask features. I think it really shapes the way your content roadmap. I think instead of just writing to write, I think you really need to hone in into what your audience is searching for, what the answers they're looking for, and how you should be. It's my job to educate and just be that person, that SEO person for the editorial team that leads them, just gives them advice on how we should structure our content so it does show up in these features. So I think it's really important the way we just structure our content.
So, yeah, I mean, we do focus a lot on schema data, make sure that that's correct and structured correctly. That's a big part of any, if we release a new template for a new article type, for instance, that's just part of the build. So we're okay with this. Obviously, as a publisher, I'm interested in them coming and click through to our site. I want them on my site at the end of the day. I don't want them just to do, 0 click. But I understand this is important. Definitely to appear in carousels, that's great. The higher the better. And as long as the ads are pushed down, I'm all for it.
So I'm going to jump ahead to our thumbs up, thumbs down. So you have those lovely paddles there. And I'm just going to ask for you to hold up thumbs up or thumbs down. And I may try to hone in if it looks like there's some contention between the answers. But let's see here. Thumbs up, thumbs down. Very appropriate given the last question. Rich data or schema? Markup, thumbs up. They're both green. Yeah, I know, that was a mistake on our part. The down should definitely be red. Thumbs up. Audio content.
Podcast.
Link building. More long form content.
In the middle.
Interesting.
An evergreen.
I'm more of a fan of answer the question.
Yeah.
Yes, exactly. You don't need tons of text.
Yeah, the paddles and the microphones.
Yeah, the paddle. I don't have the third. So, yeah, I think not less is more because, you need to write the appropriate amount of text, but it doesn't need to be an essay.
The reasoning for my in-between is because Complex does have important long-form content that we do every year. One of the most important ones is Best Rappers Alive, and it's a list that's really important to the company, and it's really, really long. So we're trying to create a strategy that we keep that format, but still do it in a way that's still user-friendly, especially on mobile. Nobody wants to be scrolling through so many pages, but it is an important piece of content. We wouldn't want to get rid of it, so that's my in-between.
Yeah, I just don't like it when people try to make things that don't need to be long, make them long. Because if I can answer the question in 300 words, then I answer the question in 300 words. No one wants to read a 10-page dissertation on, how do I bake a potato?
I might need that. You've never seen me try to bake a potato. Lariza, who is the best rapper alive?
Ooh, for me, personally, J. Cole. I'm a J. Cole lover.
Nice.
But that's just me.
Improving internal link structure. I think we have maybe some more on that later today. AMP. Interesting. How much did Matt pay you whenever you left? PWAs.
Yeah.
We actually, for you, if you would like to go on your phones now and have a look at wsj.com, you will see that our mobile web homepage and article pages are rendered, specifically the homepage. We completely re-engineered it to load as a PWA, and it's more like the app. And we saw a significant lift after publishing it.
Yeah, that's really good to know because we're currently in the process of sort of converting some of our main pages, so that's definitely going to discuss.
Carolyn, dissenting opinion at all?
No dissent.
Artificial intelligence in digital publishing.
Also in between.
We actually have a lab dedicated to doing that in the newsroom. So we have people, and I work with them, and I love what they do. I think it's great. I think the key thing to add here is, it does require human interaction. This isn't just something that's going to replace jobs.
So
not tomorrow, not in the near future.
Yeah, you can't have machines writing news.
But they can help you guide.
They can write a stub maybe.
Well, can help you with keyword strategy. They can help you with a lot of things.
I don't like
It's
doing
great. Yeah, you should try it.
that. No, yeah.
Give in.
That wasn't what I meant. I was thinking more specifically of like, I know there's some hyper-local efforts to just completely automate the creation of news and the writing of news, and that's kind of, I find that uncomfortable.
And we had one more premium publisher question, which is what types of things do you focus on in terms of metrics for your site for user experience, if you had to pick one? Just one user experience metric.
Say page speed.
Yeah.
I mean, it's not just mobile, it's desktop. I will bounce off a site or a page if it's not loading on my desktop. I just do. I'm a bouncer.
I think page speed is, and for metrics, that's what I pay attention to. Now, the newsroom I know pays attention to recirculation. That's their biggest thing, and if stories aren't recirculating, then they assume that the experience is bad, and that's why, and then they go back and we revisit that. So for me, probably page speed, but for everyone else, I think it's recirculation.
I agree with page speed. I think now with mobile first index, the priority should be your mobile experience. It should have been your mobile experience, but the reality is we were focused on our desktop, just speed, but definitely page speed metrics, all of them, just getting those pages to load faster is definitely a priority. So,
Excellent. Well, I want to thank you all for joining us for this panel. I actually wish I could ask you guys questions all day long, and I'm sure many of the folks sitting out here do as well, and I'm sure they will try as soon